It's a very nice title, but unfortunately I can't claim the credit for it because it's a colleague of mine, Morgane de Verdier, who actually put this presentation together. So I'm just giving it on her behalf. Now, really, this is very much an update, so I probably won't keep you very long before your coffee break, because for any of you who've been at the previous stakeholder meetings, we've tended to give an update at each meeting as to where we are with prac, with the organisation, with the meetings, the nominations, etc. So this is really just an update to say where are we now. And where we are now is pretty much just 2 months before the first meeting. So we really should be at quite an advanced stage. So I'll try and give you an overview as to where exactly that is and what we see we have to do between now and the first meeting in July. Now, can I run this? Yes. Okay, so in terms of the nominations update, I think the last time I spoke to you here, we had quite a comprehensive list of nominations from the member states. We've had a few more since then. We still have 2 member states outstanding. We will be following those up most likely at the management board in June, just to ask those member states when we can expect to receive their nominations. We're assuming that they have, the member states have indeed identified the experts, but have various processes through their ministries, etc., with respect to those nominations. So we haven't formally been advised of those yet. In terms of delegation, you'll be aware that the legislation does allow that a member state can delegate its tasks in prac to another member state. From that point of view, the only delegation that we've been made aware of so far is a delegation from one of the EEA states to an EU member state. Now, what this will mean in practice is that, in this case, the member state Austria will vote as normal with respect to their vote, which will count with respect to the adoption of the procedure. For those of you who are aware of how the EEA votes are handled in other committees, the votes from Norway and Iceland and Liechtenstein are noted and recorded, but they don't count with respect to quorum or whatever. So in this case, Austria will vote on their behalf. Their vote will also be recorded as a vote for Liechtenstein. I'm not sure if that's very clear, but this is how we see it happening in practice. In terms of the appointments from the European Commission, now I imagine you've had an update earlier today in this regard. So what I can say there, and certainly not on behalf of the Commission, is that the Commissioner is still in the process of selecting their experts. The calls for expression of interest went out at the end of last year. We're anticipating that within the next few weeks we should be advised of the nominations of the experts with the specific scientific expertise. So the 6 experts to be appointed by the Commission. With respect to the patients and healthcare professional representatives, we've been informed by the Commission that there's a delay in that regard. So at this point, it looks as if those appointments will not be in place for the first meeting of the prac in July. But again, we wait for the Commission to advise us formally in that regard. There's a requirement in the legislation that there should be a consultation both by the Management Board and by the Commission on the final composition of the prac. In this regard, we will be going to the June meeting of the Management Board, pretty much telling them what we're telling you here today, that this is the situation we have at the moment, and inviting them to view the list of nominations at this point. But in order to have a final formal consultation in advance of the first meeting of the prac, we will probably be going to the Management Board then for a written procedure consultation in advance of the first meeting, so that the composition at the July meeting will be as consulted upon by the Commission and by the Management Board. I think we also pointed out before that there's a high overlap with respect to the appointments of the prac members and alternates to the existing members of the Pharmacovigilance Working Party. Now, that we see as having a high level of advantage and maybe some disadvantages, in that obviously we're bringing the expertise and the experience of people who have been dealing with pharmacovigilance issues across Europe for several years. This is coming into the prac committee. The disadvantage, of course, is they're coming from a working party which didn't have the same mandate as the prac. So the prac will have new tasks and new responsibilities, and we basically have to ensure that we are operating as a committee and not just as a working party with a new title of committee against it. But I don't think it will be that way. Okay, again, some of these slides you will be more than aware of, and it's just really a quick reminder with respect to the new tasks for the prac committee as defined in the legislation, and several of these tasks were previously either within the CHMP or the member state remit. So now these are coming into the prac committee, and there are also additional responsibilities for the CMDH. So a reminder of the mandate that prac should cover all aspects of risk management in relation to the use of medicinal products, and the evaluation of risk should be carried out in the context of identified benefits. So this is the key, it's sort of the cornerstone on which all of the tasks of prac sit. And then these tasks, and this is again a fairly high-level overview of what the prac will be focusing on within their meetings. So you have the urgent union procedures, the Article 107, also the other referrals further down the list, the Article 31 and Article 20 referrals. Then you have the overview of study protocols for the post-authorization safety studies, evaluation of the results of these studies. You have tasks in relation to pharmacovigilance inspections and audits, overview of RMPs, signal detection responsibilities, and roles also in relation to renewals, annual reassessments, and safety type 2 variations. And several of these tasks are covered specifically in the legislation. Others are more tied into the overall mandate of the task in relation to its role with respect to risk management. So having looked at the tasks, then what are the outputs going to be from the prac in this regard? Well, again, going back to the legislation, where it's quite clear that the role of the prac in this regard is to give recommendations or advice primarily to the CHMP or to the CMDH in relation to any question relating to pharmacovigilance activities. And in case either of the groups, the CHMP or the CMDH, have divergent views from those expressed by the prac, then these should be duly justified. In terms of the outputs of prac, what we're trying to do, and we've sort of had several different versions of documents, etc., where we've looked at the tasks, we've looked at the outputs, and we've tried to put them into some sort of a scenario which actually makes it clear what the role of the prac is and what the output of the prac is, and also what products that are involved under all of these. So this one is just listed in order of the output of the prac, and we've identified approximately 6 different areas under the output column. And then against each of these outputs, we've tried to put what the processes are that are against those and the types of products that these dealt with. And again, you may have seen a similar slide earlier today, so my apologies if that's the case. But just to quickly look at that there, where there's an explicit mandate in the legislation, and these are probably the easier ones to look at, which leads to a formal decision-making phase and a prac recommendation. You have the referrals, the PSUR assessments, and the non-interventional pass. Then for other of the tasks of the prac, you have an explicit mandate in the legislation, but without a formal decision-making phase. And in this regard, the intention is that this will give rise to a prac advice. And again, we've listed varying tasks of the prac there, so the RMPs, renewals, etc. So working down the list, then you can just see the types of distinction we have made with respect to the outputs, and this is really just to facilitate putting the agendas together and also making it clear what the outputs are and where also those outputs go with respect to whether they go to the CHMP, to the CMDH, or whether they're directly applicable. In terms of the rapporteurship and appointment of rapporteurs at prac, this is something which certainly has given rise to a lot of discussion and varying proposals in the last few months. We're still working on those proposals, and you might say, well, we've left it a little bit late now, but absolutely we want to get to an outcome where the appointments at the prac level are based on the best existing scientific expertise, and in that regard to also look where possible at providing a fresh pair of eyes, so that you don't necessarily leave the assessment of a procedure, a product, the pharmacovigilance in relation to that, with the same assessment team, the same member state from cradle to grave. So you also invite other experts, other assessment teams to look at that. So we're hoping that we've almost got there, that we have a proposal now, which, I mean, the first bullet point there says to be endorsed by the management board. Well, that's our hope, that we will get that endorsement at the management board. And with that, then we can put a guidance document out on the appointment of rapporteurs. So just the final point there is, regardless of who at the prac level are appointed as the prac rapporteur, that prac rapporteur should in any case closely collaborate with the CHMP rapporteur or with the reference member state in the case of non-centrally authorised products. I think I'll just skip over these slides. It's just again a reminder as to the role of prac in the decision-making process, that once there is a prac recommendation, if there's a centrally authorised product involved, that goes to the CHMP, and then that opinion from the CHMP is submitted to the Commission with the scientific grounds and any divergences attached to that opinion. And a similar scenario with respect to the to the role of prac, where you have no centrally authorised products involved, so only nationally authorised products. We have an overview here of the route through the CMD, with the highlight that in this regard, this is one of the new areas or responsibilities, in the respect that CMD now will have a formal vote in this regard, and you have the different routes there depending on whether there's consensus or not at the CMD. In terms of the meeting organisation, and again we had some discussion as to the timing of the prac in relation to the CHMP or the CMD. We've now had a formal decision that the prac meeting should normally meet 2 weeks in advance of the CHMP, and this is to ensure the finalisation of procedures coming from the prac, and also to ensure any necessary interaction between prac and CHMP, so that you don't have a scenario where prac finalises something on a Thursday afternoon and the CHMP is supposed to take an opinion on that on the Monday of the following week. We need time for circulation of documents, for review of documents, and for interactions between the concerned parties as needed. The prac is envisaged to be a 4-day meeting. But if you're fairly quick at reviewing the dates there, you'll notice that the October, well, actually, first of all, if we look at the order of the meetings, you have the first meeting of the prac in July, and this is taking place in Brussels because of the arrangements made with respect to the Olympics in London. Then you have really what we see as the first full meeting of the prac taking place at the beginning of September. You go into the October meeting, then in fact what we would consider the November meeting, or the next meeting in line, is still in October. So one meeting at the beginning of October, one meeting at the end. The second October meeting is a 3-day meeting, and that's because of the EMA holidays on the 1st and 2nd of November, so it just wasn't possible to have a 4-day meeting there. So we'll have to be very streamlined in the discussions at that October meeting. Then the last meeting in 2012 will be at the end of November, then allowing the 2-week gap for the December CHMP and CMD meetings. So the normal timing will be starting Monday at 1 o'clock, going through to Thursday afternoon. We highlight again that oral explanations are possible in front of the prac, and that for the Article 107I procedures, public hearings can also take place. There's also the possibility of the MAH or any other person intending to submit confidential data to present that data in a non-public part of the hearing, and the modalities of these public hearings are still being finalised. In terms of the agenda, then, well, really, I've given you the overview of the tasks. Then the challenge is to turn those tasks into a workable agenda for the prac committee. So you can see what you would, I think, essentially expect on the agenda: the referrals, any matters arising from PSURs, advice on safety issues, matters relating to signal management, RMP, PAS, etc. Now, the idea is that the prac agenda will be made public prior to the meeting start. Any information which is considered confidential will be deleted for the public agenda, but our intention is to have quite a comprehensive agenda published in advance of the meeting. Now, the prac minutes, this again is a new area that we're going into, although we have meeting reports from some of the committees, etc. I think the only minutes that we're publishing at an EMA level at the moment are the management board minutes. So our challenge then is to get the transparency correct with respect to the publication of the minutes of the prac. This is the starting point as well, because you'll be aware that the legislation also envisages that the pharmacovigilance aspects of the CHMP and the CMDH minutes should also be made public. So our starting point is publication of the prac minutes. That should then be followed in the future by a publication of the pharmacovig issues in the CHMP and CMD minutes. So in terms of what you can expect to see in the prac minutes, the idea is that this would reflect the background of the issue, provide a summary of the questions raised and addressed by the prac, and the conclusions reached with the action to be taken. And these minutes will be made public once they're adopted by the prac. Still on the transparency issue, and again, considering what is also outlined in the legislation, the names of the prac members, the qualifications and declaration of interest will be made publicly available. We already do that for all of our committees here. The prac agendas and minutes will be made public at predefined time points. Also, once the prac meeting is over, it's anticipated that high-level prac outcomes will be made publicly available. Now, the format, the content, and the timing of that is still under internal discussion, but it is anticipated that post-meeting there will be a prac outcome published. In terms of the final prac recommendations or advice, these will be made fully available once the CHMP or the CMDH have concluded on these relevant procedures. Okay, in summary, and this is probably paraphrasing something that Peter Arlett has mentioned probably at several of the stakeholder meetings, but has certainly mentioned it internally, this is the most challenging piece of legislation that the agency has been involved with in recent years. We've been putting a lot of effort, as several people have been, into working towards the implementation of the legislation. It seemed fine when we started, I suppose, 18 months to 2 years ago. Now we're at the situation where we've got only 8 weeks to go. We are pretty much there, but there is still work to be done in terms of finalising key documents and issues to make sure that once the legislation becomes live, the prac comes into being, that we are ready. It doesn't all stop, obviously, once we get to the first meeting of the prac. There will be a learning curve, and that will be quite steep. So I think we will be faced with issues within the next few months. But the key message, I think, to take away is that we consider that together we'll certainly get there. So I think that's the last slide. So thank you for your attention. I can take any questions.
Thanks very much, Sheila. And I suspect the newest of that information was probably the slides on transparency aspects, which I know there's a lot of interest about. And while some of the details, we haven't yet got the final details, and in fact, some of these points will be discussed at the EMA Management Board the week after next, relating to some of the details on transparency. The fact that we will have the prac agenda published in advance, the fact that very soon after the prac has met, there will be highlights of the prac meeting published, and then the final prac minutes and the actual advice and recommendations published in full, other than personal data protection and commercially confidential, which I think means industrial secrets related to manufacturing only. This will all be made public, and this is important for you to realise. We flagged it before, but Sheila's highlighted a little bit more of the detail on our thinking in this regard, which will go live as of the end of July. And certainly in terms of product-related issues, that means the beginning of September. So any questions, comments, please? Hand at the back. I can't see who it's attached to. I think it's Val Simmons, yes. Yes, indeed.
Recognised by her hair. One's a sort of point of clarification. The other point is a usual Simmons dumb question. The first is the point of clarification. I saw recently from an extremely intelligent individual who had looked at the revisions in the directive and had interpreted some new provision in it that the mandate of the prac extended beyond just pharmacovigilance. I must admit, I went back through the legal bits, and I'm not a lawyer, and couldn't see where on earth they got that from. I mean, to me, seems to me very clear that the mandate is around safety and pharmacovigilance and not beyond that. So I just wanted to see if that could be possible to be clarified. The second bit is actually a question. I may have missed it because I don't have meticulous attention to detail, but it's not clear to me who is going to be chairing the prac, not from the point of view of the person, because of course I'm sure that's a trade secret, but I just wondered where you were in terms of making that nomination.
Okay, maybe I can take the second question. In relation to the chair and what I probably, as you started to put your question, I realised that I hadn't really said much about what we plan to give to the first meeting of the prac at their inaugural meeting in July. Now, this for us will be very much a procedural meeting, which will be focused around the overview of the rules of procedure of prac, because ultimately prac has to adopt these rules of procedure and they then go the route of the management board, commission, etc. for formal endorsement. So before there can be any election of a chair, there has to be an adoption of the rules of procedure, which also includes rules with respect to the election of the chair. The other thing is, this is a new committee, so if you bring a committee together in the first meeting, not all colleagues are going to know each other or whatever, and say, okay, now somebody put yourself forward for chair and we'll have an election there. We didn't consider that that was the best way forward. So of course we do need a chair, but what we're considering is this will not happen at the first meeting. The first meeting will focus on adoption of the rules of procedure. There will then be a call for expression of interest in standing for chair. That will go through August with the view that the election will then take place as first order of business at the September meeting.
And maybe I might be reasonably well placed to answer the what is pharmacovigilance question. It's actually, I think it's probably what in the UK system we'd call an inspired question. Certainly in the European parliamentary system, you'd call questions that are presented as being ignorant when they're not ignorant at all. It's very interesting because in the context of referrals, the debate is raging in the Council of Ministers as to what is the scope of the pharmacovigilance referrals. And that's still, it's not, that's not signed off, as it were. And a few of the things that make it complex are the fact that the prac has a very broad mandate for anything to do with pharmacovigilance risk management, but also safety in the context of therapeutic benefit, which to most people sounds like benefit risk of products on the market. We also need to acknowledge that there's no definition in the EU legislation of pharmacovigilance. So, we've got regulations and directives on pharmacovigilance without actually defining what it is. And as some of you would have heard me say before, I think the definition of risk management is actually pretty well pharmacovigilance, just with proactivity added. We also need to acknowledge that the WHO and most pharmacovigilantes talk about a lack of efficacy as being an adverse reaction, and they talk about reporting lack of efficacy. Now, that's a little controversial, but it sort of gives, it highlights the fact that it isn't clear-cut what the scope is. I think what we can say is that if we have quality, let's take referrals, and let's forget about the fact that it's still being debated in the Council. Let's say what we're going to do in July. If it's about a quality issue which does not appear to have posed any safety risk, this will not go to the prac. If we're talking about obvious post-authorization safety studies, PSURs, referrals based on a clear safety risk, it'll go to the prac. If we're talking about issues of benefit-risk judgment by a member state, where there's both safety concerns and perhaps not very robust evidence of efficacy, a classic old product on the market where you've got accumulating spontaneous reports showing harm, then we would anticipate that this will go to the prac. There will, however, be some issues which are purely efficacy issues, where perhaps not having efficacy does not result in a lost opportunity, if you like. So if I'm talking about you're not being denied an effective cancer treatment, something like that, maybe some of those won't go to the prac. So that was a rather long-winded way of saying it's not as clear as it might be. We would anticipate that all safety issues are on centrally authorized products, and at the request of member states, any safety issue for national authorized products will go to the prac, and then benefit-risk issues, which have two sides to that equation, benefit and risk, will also, in the context of referral procedures, go to the prac. I hope that was a reasonably clear answer. Any questions to Sheila about prac decision-making phase? In which case, Sheila, thank you very much. And I think, oh, sorry, please, last question before coffee.
Yes, Isabelle Clermont, FPA. Maybe less for Sheila, but more for Florian about the follow-up on my questions this morning, the extension of the scope for the urgent union procedure. Do I understand correctly from what you said that in no way, well, depending on the conclusion of the Council, indeed, that would impact the legal basis for the prac and what is currently in the wording of the legislation, because there have been no amendments put together to mirror the potential expansion of the scope of the urgent union procedure and the may need to revisit the mandate of the prac. So is the wording, as you mentioned it, Peter, would be sufficient in case the topics to be covered by the urgent union procedure would be expanded?
Maybe I give an orientation then, Florian, if you want to add. The discussion in the context of the Council at the moment is not about what goes to the prac and what doesn't go to the prac. It's about what member states have to refer for resolution at European level. So the mandate of the prac, I don't think, is touched by the, if you like, compulsory scope of the urgent union procedure. That would be my interpretation. But Florian, you've probably been closer to the most recent Council discussions. Having heard that quite interesting question, any reflection?
Yeah, I basically agree with you, Peter, that the reflection currently ongoing at the Council or subject to the Commission proposal is on the specific procedural dealings with the scope as already defined in the current 107I. It's not about extending the scope to new topics, but the question whether in some cases there should be more automatic handling of these or more automatic follow-up and less discretion. And so there is no proposal which would expand 107I to subjects not yet covered by 107I.